Well, welcome. The title of this talk is Surviving and Thriving in the Real World, Building Life Skills for Autistic Adolescents. My name's Amy Duncan. I'm a clinical psychologist and associate professor at Cincinnati Children's Hospital. And my main clinical and research interests are really figuring out how best to facilitate a positive outcome for adolescents with autism after they graduate from high school. So clinically, I've done a lot of work assessing and treating autistic adolescents, and this directly informed my research into the development and evaluation of interventions. I'm currently working on interventions that address executive functioning skills, but also daily living skills for adolescents with autism, and I'm going to talk about that work today. So I like to start this talk with this question. What's the single biggest predictor of a person's success? And usually you might think of a lot of different answers, but knowing this is a talk on life skills, if you guessed that life skills are the single biggest predictor, you would have guessed right. And the reason being that we've seen a lot of longitudinal studies over the last 20 to 50 years show this. So one 20-year study by the University of Minnesota found doing chores from the age of 3 is the best predictor for good education, a solid career, and healthy relationships in adulthood. In another Harvard University study that's been going on for many years, they found that willingness and capacity to work in childhood by doing things like household chores was the best predictor of mental health in adulthood. More so than things like socioeconomic status, family problems, et cetera. However, another study that was done really recently found that while 82% of current parents said that they did regular chores growing up, only about 28% said they required their own children to do them. So that's a big disconnect with this idea of knowing how important life skills are. And then, in a recently published book that's a great read for parents of teenagers and young adults, it's a book called How to Raise an Adult by Julie Lythcott-Haims. She's the former dean of freshman students at Stanford, and she really talks about how household chores help kids build responsibility, autonomy, and perseverance. And so a quote from her that I like to put out there is, if kids aren't doing the dishes, it means someone else is doing them for them. And so they're absolved of not only the work, but of learning that work has to be done and that each one of us must contribute for the whole. So chores really instill the attitude in life that, life is about teamwork and cooperation, and a clean, tidy living space doesn't happen by magic. And so chores and life skills are truly important for everyone, but we're really going to talk today about how to target life skills in autistic adolescents to impact their short-term and long-term outcomes. So here are our objectives for today. We're really going to be talking about how to target daily living skills using a range of evidence-based strategies. I'm hopeful that you'll leave this with a lot of practical strategies that you can utilize. Okay, want to briefly just talk about the outcomes for autistic adults. With the increasing prevalence rate of an autism diagnosis, more and more individuals are entering adulthood each year after graduation from high school. And they're also often entering an adult world that is not necessarily ready to adequately meet their needs in terms of services and supports to facilitate a positive outcome. And so what we've seen in terms of longitudinal studies that, not very many are achieving kind of this ideal optimal adult outcome. So we're seeing some difficulties in areas like college, work, independent living, and social connectedness. And the idea behind talking about these outcomes is we just want to make sure that we set all adolescents and young adults up for success by making sure they've got those foundation of life skills that will help them reach their goals in adulthood. And so what are the predictors of a positive adult outcome for those with autism? So this graphic is taken from the recent Lancet Commission that outlined how to individualize clinical care for individuals with ASD across the lifespan. And while there are many factors that have been linked to a more positive adult outcome, daily living skills is one of the few predictors that is not a core symptom of autism. So it's not social skills. It's not restricted in repetitive behaviors and interests. And so what that suggests is that daily living skills could be malleable, can be changed, and can be improved using evidence-based strategies. And this seems to suggest that daily living skills may be a key area to address and intervene in order to then facilitate a more positive adult outcome. Okay, so before we get too deep into it, what are daily living skills? These are all of the skills and tasks we do to take care of ourselves across the lifespan at home, school, work, and in the community. Sometimes they're called life skills, sometimes they're called activities of daily living, but that is really the core definition. And a lot of times when we're thinking of life skills, we break them down into three main areas. The first one being personal. And so that consists of taking care of yourself. So eating, drinking, getting dressed, using the toilet, brushing teeth, taking a shower, choosing the right clothes to wear, and managing your own health when you're sick, or just, going to your regular physical or dentist appointment. The second area of daily living skills are domestic. And this is all household things you do to take care of the house. So when you're younger, it's putting toys away, maybe making simple snacks. And as you get older, it's going to be things like using a toaster or a blender, cleaning your room, using the microwave, stove, and oven to cook, doing laundry, changing light bulbs. And then the last area of life skills is community. And this involves all the things you may be doing as you navigate the community. So telling and managing time, knowing what things cost, getting from one place to another, budgeting your money, using a checking and savings account, and getting around, whether that's driving or using public transportation. And so when we think about the daily living skills profile for individuals with autism, as I said, they are not included in the symptoms to make a diagnosis of ASD, but they really emerge as an area that is significantly impaired. And they are often a significant challenge for individuals with autism across the lifespan. And so that being said, they are impaired beginning in preschool, and they continue to be impaired even into adulthood. And the gap gets wider. So by the time that adolescents with autism who do not have a comorbid intellectual disability, so have average cognitive abilities, by the time they get to adolescence, their skills are about 6 to 9 years below their chronological age. And this is actually worse than adolescents with other neurodevelopmental disabilities and their typically developing peers. So practically what this means is that a 16-year-old with autism may have the daily living skills of a 7 to 9-year-old. And this is a huge skill deficit that needs to be addressed. And it's easy to see how if one has daily living skills deficits, they're going to struggle to have positive and optimal outcomes in work, college, and independent living. Our team just conducted a study where we looked and did an in-depth sort of micro-analysis of the profile of daily living skills strengths and challenges in autistic adolescents who do not have an intellectual disability. We use the Vineland Adaptive Behavior Scales 3rd edition, which is a commonly used measure to look at these skills. And so we had a sample of about 150 adolescents who had IQs above 70, and their average age was around 16. And so these are the strengths. And what you'll see, these are parent-reported strengths. What you'll see about these strengths is that they tend to be skills that are mastered by children who are between roughly 2 to 8 years of age. So putting your toys away, bathing independently, basic safety awareness like scissors and crossing the street. And what I want to show you now is that the majority of age-appropriate daily living skills in this group of 16-year-olds with autism, these skills were a challenge. And so these are skills that we would expect, middle schoolers and high schoolers to be able to do or start to be able to do. Things like, doing household chores, putting your clothes in the hamper, maybe starting a load of laundry, putting dishes away, having an awareness of what things cost, carrying your wallet. And so what this study really clearly documented is that the skills that adolescents with autism, they need to develop these skills if we want to close the gap between their age, and their life skills, with the goal that this would then set them up to be successful after they graduate from high school and transition to the adult world. And so we know that daily living skills can be addressed using known evidence-based strategies. We're going to talk about those shortly. But there are no intervention packages to target the acquisition, mastery, and generalization of age-appropriate daily living skills for adolescents with autism. And our team really sought to fill this gap by developing a daily living skills intervention. We call it Surviving and Thriving in the Real World. And it utilizes evidence-based strategies to target some specific critical daily living skills for autistic adolescents who do not have a comorbid intellectual disability. Here's an overview of the content that we cover in our 14 sessions of STRAW. Our main modules, and you'll see here, we focus on really hygiene and self-care as we develop a morning and/or nighttime routine. We then jump to really looking at domestic skills by focusing on laundry and then kitchen and cooking. Grocery shopping is kind of the bridge between domestic, that cooking, and money management. And then our last set of sessions focus on both basic and then more complex money management. And as you can see here, the content that we cover in STRAW really closely aligns with daily living skills challenges, especially in domestic area, which tends to be particularly challenging. Here is just briefly, want to just talk a little bit about the elements of the STRAW intervention, because we're going to talk about them in more detail shortly. We developed this intervention through our work with adolescents and their caregivers in the clinic and the school settings. And we did a series of studies to figure out what skills do we want to target, what do families, what do teens want to target, and what strategies are going to be most effective for building and mastering these skills. And in our initial set of studies, what we found is that adolescents with autism made about 2 to 4 years of gains in daily living skills from pre to post treatment over the course of about a 14-week intervention. These were done with small sample sizes, so we refined it a bit based on therapist feedback, based on teen and caregiver feedback as well. And so what you're seeing here is sort of our finalized version of STRAW. And so it's a 14-week intervention. It consists of 90-minute parent and adolescent group sessions. We have some funding through NIH and Department of Defense to do this work. And we had to pivot quite a bit during COVID. We were doing all of our sessions in person. And I say it was the true silver lining of COVID in that we had to switch to telehealth. And what we did is we have a parent group session where the parents come together and we talk about how things are going, what's working, what's not working. And then we have a parent-teen dyad session where a therapist meets one-on-one with the parent, caregiver, and teen, and we work on a specific skill in their home. If we're working on cooking, we use their stove or their microwave, using recipes and ingredients that they like and that they want to cook. So moving forward, we're going to continue that strategy of doing telehealth. Some of our sort of core evidence-based strategies that we use are things like visual strategies, technology, task analysis, which we'll talk about in more detail shortly. And then you'll see here some of our essential components are things like a contract that we use to track progress and rewards for working on specific daily living skills, a lot of instruction, modeling, and practice by the caregiver and the therapist. And, really kind of building buy-in and getting some motivation from both the teen and the caregiver to work on these skills. Daily living skills are not necessarily inherently fun to work on, but we know they're critical for adult outcome. Here's an example of a contract, and I'll go through it in more detail shortly. This is the essential ingredient in our STRAW intervention, and that it clearly outlines for both teens and their caregiver what their goal is, right? What the expectations are, what do they need to do, how often, how independent do they need to be, and what is the reward? Rewards are eventually faded over time, but at the start of the intervention, the majority of teens are working for a reward. This is an example of a contract sort of at the very last of our 14-week intervention, so the last session. Okay, just want to briefly go over our results from our recently completed randomized clinical trial. So we had 112 autistic adolescents who had IQs above 70 and had daily living skills deficits. And they were randomized to either receive STRAW, the life skills intervention, or PEERS, which is a social skills intervention. And our main outcome was looking at their daily living skills domain and subdomain scores on the Vineland. You can see here that their daily living skills domain was about 35 points below their IQ. So that indicates that these adolescents who are roughly 16 years of age have daily living skills ranging from about 5 to 10 years of age at baseline. And these are the results. We're working on publishing these, so you should see these. A main goal was to determine whether STRAW led to more gains as compared to a control group, and this was confirmed. So what we saw is that STRAW participants made significant gains on the daily living skills domain and our domestic subdomain, which looks at cooking, cleaning, laundry, as compared to the control group. And then this just really illustrates that our adolescents in STRAW made about 3 years of gains in both personal and community daily living skills, but 4 years of gains in domestic daily living skills. So there's still work to do, but it's promising that we're beginning to see this gap closing. And so STRAW shows some promise at targeting life skills across a 14-week intervention, especially in this area of domestic, which is really a critical piece for transitioning to adulthood and living independently in particular. Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about what we learned as we've been developing STRAW over the last 8 or 9 years. And we've worked with, over 100 families who've received STRAW, and we're going to talk through what you can do to put a plan together to tackle daily living skills for autistic adolescents. Okay, so the first thing is it can be very helpful to assess daily living skills in order to have an understanding of where the teen is and figure out a plan for how to address daily living skills in a thoughtful and systematic manner. So I'm going to go through some informal measures, which are things you can find on the internet or Pinterest or in a book, and then some things that are more formal that you would have to go to a professional like a psychologist or a social worker or your pediatrician to get this information. This chart is from the 1950s and it talks about age-appropriate chores. I just always think it's interesting because yes, it was, over 70 years ago, but a lot of these things still hold true. Folks may not be chopping firewood at ages 2 to 3, but it's this idea that we need to really hold children and adolescents accountable for taking care of themselves and their household in a variety of ways. And that's going to be individualized based on one's own home. This is a more updated version of age-appropriate chores. This is from Parent Magazine, and there's lots of these on Pinterest. But it is nice because it gives you an idea if you want to tackle some of these things, well, gosh, what skills should I start with? And this is kind of a way to get an idea of, if someone is 12 to 14, it is okay to start thinking about how could they make a full meal or help with some meal planning, which would in turn take some of the stress and mental load off of the caregiver. This is a fantastic book that I really love. It's Capable by Sarah Albright. It's available in libraries and on Amazon. It's similar to that checklist, but it's more in depth. And I like it to kind of serve as a very kind of comprehensive starting point for life skills. Here's sort of an excerpt from that book for 11 to 12-year-olds. And she breaks things down into safety, that an 11 or 12-year-old should be able to use a fire extinguisher, that we need to be thinking about things like shaving, knowing when to go to the doctor, being able to start looking into some home skills like unclogging a drain. And so this is also sort of a helpful resource if you're like, gosh, what should I work on? Or what are some different things to tackle? This is another checklist. This is from the college living experience, and this is definitely more geared towards young adults. So once you're sort of out of high school. But I think it's really helpful because it takes some of the very practical life skills that someone's going to be doing on a day-to-day basis and puts them into a checklist format, which is really a task analysis, which we'll talk about shortly. And so, for example, a morning routine. This is often one of the most difficult parts of caregivers' mornings as they're trying to get their high schooler out the door and make sure they have everything and that they did everything. And this really breaks down the main steps that need to be done, give or take. There may be some things to add or subtract from this list, but it's a great starting point. Similar time and organization is another really important life skill that kind of also, goes into executive functioning a little bit, but these are some things that one would need to do on a regular basis. Household upkeep, maybe more of a weekly basis or a monthly, depending on, personal preference. This is another checklist called the Parents of Teenagers Survival Checklist. A local high school in our town uses this as a way to, give parents a heads up that these are some things, again, to kind of work on or tackle. And I thought that was kind of a cool strategy to be able to go through and then be able to kind of pull in and work on those skills slowly over time. So, and then in terms of more formal checklists, so the Vineland Adaptive Behavior Skills 3rd edition, this is a long form that if you've, been in a psychology assessment, you may have filled out before, but it is an in-depth assessment of daily living skills in these 3 areas of personal, domestic, and community, and gives you a score and an understanding of sort of what are strengths and challenges across these areas. And roughly where does your child fall in terms of age equivalent? If they're 16, are they at a 16-year-old level, or are they more at a 10-year-old level? And there's some work to be done to get them to close that gap. And so, the idea is we want to assess and then teach daily living skills so that adolescents and then young adults can meet their goals, whatever those goals may be. These are some developmental tasks of adulthood, so things that might be expected. And while not everyone will progress through these tasks, many of these tasks will likely contribute to the quality of life and happiness of autistic adults. And so in most of these developmental tasks, you will have more success, or it will be easier if you have a foundation of strong daily living skills. Okay, so we're going to talk about putting together a plan prior to the transition to adulthood, so ideally in adolescence, so that they have the life skills to live independently, go to college, get a job, have social relationships, and navigate the community. Okay, so the first step in doing this is to really prioritize which skills you would like to target, and so this can be done in a lot of different ways. So these questions are really to kind of get you to think on this. How would you do this? And when we're working with families, we go through all of these questions as we're really sort of figuring out how we're going to do this. So the first question, what skills will have the largest impact? So this is impact for not only the teen, but also for the family as a whole. Is there something that would make the whole family's life easier if we were able to tackle something? It's one of the reasons we tackle morning routine, because families and teens talk about how much stress is involved from getting up to getting out the door on school mornings. And so, that would ideally make everyone's life easier. It could potentially also decrease stress for both, the caregiver, the entire family, and the team. Other things to think about, is there something that will help the teen become more independent? Is that a significant goal? Do we want to get them moving towards doing more on their own, or more on their own without prompting or reminders? In terms of impact, is there a skill that will improve social relationships and interactions with peers? So caregivers talk a lot about, things like wearing deodorant and washing hair. Those are hygiene skills that actually would impact social relationships and interactions with peers. So maybe that is one to target, relatively early in the game as we're figuring out our plan. What skills may be the easiest to target? Easy being Are there skills that the teen already knows part of or some of? Okay. Are there skills that maybe the caregiver is providing minimal prompts or only occasional supervision, and those could eventually be faded? So in something like, cooking, if they love scrambled eggs and want to make scrambled eggs, but they require the caregiver to kind of be there to monitor stove safety, how can we give them that knowledge and that experience so that the caregiver can fade back and not be right there when the teen wants to make scrambled eggs or other foods for themselves? In terms of, which skills are the hardest? These are not often the ones you want to start with. Are there skills that the teen's really dependent on you for? Are there skills that they are resistant to learning? Cleaning the bathroom is not fun for anyone, most of us. And so that's probably not the skill to start with if we're going to pick something. Another thing to assess is motivation. What skills is your teen interested in learning? Is it cooking? Is it a lot of our teens really enjoy learning budgeting by doing some real world budgeting? The family is planning for a vacation and the teen helps plan it out. Or, a holiday is coming up and they need to buy some gifts. And so budgeting for gifts or helping the parent with that. Or, thinking through how to budget for groceries. How much do they want to spend every week and how much are they spending? So pulling the teen in, seeing what they're interested in, but also making the point that these are life skills. They aren't always fun. Laundry and putting dishes away is not fun. They may eventually need to learn them, but we can start with doing some things that are motivating as well. And then, are there potential obstacles? Thinking through time that it takes to work on these skills, energy and effort and motivation from the caregiver or whomever's working on teaching this with the teen. You really want to think through, are we ready to do this? What might get in the way? And we want to put a realistic plan together. And oftentimes the first place to start is to do an assessment, to pull out one of those checklists and look at it, the caregiver look at it first. Identify some potential areas to start, and then pull the teen in and work together to identify some areas. That is automatically going to get more buy-in with the teen if you're asking them, gosh, we've got to pick some of these skills, but do you have ones that you want to pick? I have an idea of things I think we could work on, but I want to hear it from you. Definitely a way to build in buy-in and involve the teen in the process. Okay. So I want to give a case example of my 9-year-old. We're going to talk about another example here, but I think as a parent, this can be helpful to kind of go through and help you think through sort of the process that we just went through in terms of identifying skills to target. And so, obviously as someone who teaches life skills, this is important, but I went through the exact same process that we just did. And so I thought about what skills are going to have the largest impact. By far, the area that causes the most sort of stress and, just rushing and making sure we get everything done they are what I call our morning rhythm, our after school or our afternoon rhythm, and our nighttime rhythm. There's a lot of things to do. And a lot of times they're really critical to get done, especially if we have a deadline, like getting out the door in the morning. And then, another skill that will have a big impact and sort of a time saver is cleaning a major room, like a bathroom or like a bedroom. And so those are some skills as I was thinking through what to do with my 9-year-old, what we would work on, and pulled him in, and he agreed. Cleaning the bathroom was not at the top of my list, but when I said, gosh, would you rather help clean, our family room or the bathroom? He was more interested in cleaning the bathroom, which I was all on board for because that's not my favorite room to clean. And then in terms of rhythm, I'll walk you through how we did that, but he absolutely agreed that would be helpful to kind of learn how to become more independent in those tasks as well. Skills that are the easiest to target would be his bedroom. So this is something that, it's his space. He's been in there. We've done it together many times cleaning up. So I've modeled it for him. We've done it together. And then I've given him feedback when he's done it independently. We have a big family, so putting laundry away is also something we do on a daily basis. So this is something he's used to doing. It was more about me becoming more consistent with not doing it for him and giving it to him to do and letting him have that independence. Skills that he's motivated to do, he loves being outside. So anything that he can do outside is something that he would love doing, besides probably picking up dog poop or anything like that. But raking leaves, cutting the grass, those are things he's on board for. The other things I assessed was motivation. So he does want spending money. He wants money to save up for things that are bigger purchases, and he's not going to be able to buy unless he saves up his own money. Obstacles. He struggles with focusing. He gets distracted easily in the middle of tasks. And so what happens is he requires multiple prompts or needs very focused directions where we have to slow him down, look him in the eye, and give him the directions. But strengths, he loves checklists. He does great with them, and he's motivated to please. He wants to do these things. So that motivation and buy-in is there. Okay. So after you go through that process of identifying skills, the next thing to think through is developing a daily living skills contract, okay? For this contract, I say you want to be as specific and detailed as possible. Kids tend to find loopholes, so do adolescents. So the more detailed you are, the more clear everyone will be in terms of understanding what needs to be done. So the contract typically includes the following things. What skills are being targeted? If it's morning rhythm, getting out the door in the morning, what does that mean? What encompasses our morning rhythm? How much prompting is allowed? Do you get one reminder? Do you get no reminders? Do you get a reminder from a person or from a reminder on your phone app or from a smart speaker like an Amazon Alexa? Let's see, what strategies will be used to help with acquisition and mastery of these skills? Are you using checklists? Are you using a Post-it note to remind you to do it? Is it something that's coming up on a calendar or to-do list app? We'll talk more about those shortly. How often is the skill targeted? Is this a daily skill, weekly, every other week? Is it multiple times a day? What will the child earn for working on the targeted daily living skill? So are they going to earn a privilege? Are they working towards earning something like an allowance or money? And what are the expectations for earning that reward? Maybe vacuuming the family room earns a reward, but what if they didn't do a good job? What are the things around that? So setting some expectations. And when will the contract be reevaluated? I always say it's helpful to reevaluate it on a regular basis, maybe every Sunday night before the week starts, or every Friday after school, whatever works for your family's schedule. But that's going to be really beneficial to set a consistent time and to do it and talk through what worked and what didn't work and anything that's changing. And then a lot of times families do feel like it's helpful to have a third party, and that's fine. Sometimes pulling in a therapist to help with getting this going and then just kind of maintenance over time as the child grows and takes on new skills can be a really helpful thing. Okay, so going back to my 9-year-old, let me tell you sort of what our contract looks like. So he's got a total of 6 daily skills, 4 weekly skills, and then extra things that he can do for extra rewards or privileges. So his daily skills are his morning rhythm. He gets up very early, so he also empties the dishwasher in the morning, takes his vitamins or medications. He has his after school rhythm. He puts his laundry away every night, and then he has his nighttime rhythm. So those are his 6 daily skills. Then he's got weekly skills that can be done on the weekend typically. So that's cleaning his room, taking the garbage and recycling cans to the curb and then back up, cleaning the kids' bathroom, and then mopping the downstairs floor, okay? And then extra skills, if he wants, are things like raking leaves, cutting grass, picking up sticks, watering the garden, or he loves home maintenance tasks. So if we're doing like some painting or unclogging a drain, kind of helping with that and learning how to do that. As I said, he's pretty internally motivated to do most things. And he'll do bigger chores if he can earn money towards something he wants or earn like an extra cartoon on the weekend. And so he gets a weekly allowance for this. So he's 9, so we give him $9 and he gets a lot of verbal praise. So this is a magnetic board that's hanging on our fridge and we check it off. And this is a way to keep us accountable for making sure we do it every day. And that we also reevaluate it every week. And so you can have these for one kid or multiple kids if you have multiple kids in the family. But this is really our contract, and we talk through what the expectations are. But a lot of times it's helpful to document those expectations on a piece of paper, which I'll show you shortly. Just wanted to point out, he does have a rhythm checklist that's on a whiteboard or an index card. So that does clearly set his expectations. So for example, here's his morning rhythm: getting dressed, making breakfast, packing his backpack, brushing his teeth, and there's a time limit. And he has to get all of those things done by that time limit in order to, earn his reward for that day, for that task. So that's an example. This is an example of one way to do sort of a checklist or a contract. There are lots of ways to do this. So, again, if you look on the internet, there's lots of things you can get. Whiteboards tend to be really effective, but also something like this Post-it note system where each child has a different color. You write the Post-it note what they need to do, and they actually have to turn it in after they do it. So there's that additional level of accountability. So I'm going to go through some examples from our Surviving and Thriving in the Real World intervention, so you get an idea of what that looks like for our teens with autism. So this is an example of a blank contract, but this is pretty simple. It has the goal, has the expectations, has the reward. We make the teen and the parent sign it because that's accountability. It's a real contract. Both parties are sticking to what is stated on this contract. This is a different sort of contract that I've used. I call it an expectations agreement. It's just a different way of looking at it. We tend to do this when, for example, there's a lot of difficulties around homework. Not necessarily a chore per se, but we can kind of link it. And so we'll put, here are my daily chores, my weekly chores, my expectations regarding homework. I need to write everything in my planner. I need to number the order I'm going to do my assignments in terms of priority. I need to have, mom or dad check off that I did everything. I need to pack my backpack after I finish my homework. It's going to vary depending on the teen, but that's often something families ask us to kind of integrate in. This is an example of, again, that completed contract. And so I'm going to just talk a little bit about this teen. When this teen started the straw intervention, he was very unmotivated to do any life skills. So he spent most of his day either at school or leisure, watching videos, playing video games, and didn't have a ton of demands placed on him in terms of things around the house. However, his motivation increased during sessions with his parent and therapist when we talked about kind of the importance of doing these skills, that this is what you do as you're getting older and becoming an adult, and the rewards that could be earned. Okay. I will say for this teen, it did take us some time to truly identify rewards that were meaningful because he had access to a lot of things that he liked already. And so some of it was saying, gosh, now we are going to rework things a little bit. And instead of getting access to, as many movies as you want all the time, you're going to have to earn that, or you're going to have to earn additional screen time, or you're going to have to earn money to do some of the fun things that you want to do on the weekend. And so, and phrasing that in the way that this is what happens as you get older and older and become an adult. And so we're trying to just help you so that when you get to that point, it's easier. That's very abstract. That can take some time and some kind of consistency in delivering that message. But that is helpful to talk through that. We'll talk about sort of some of the strategies they used in a little bit, but what we did see was some steady progress that we troubleshooted, and it took us some time to figure out what strategies worked and what didn't. But this teen, despite us feeling like, gosh, she's not intrinsically motivated to work on some of these things, over time, as he became more independent and did things and got praise for it, and you feel good when you do some of these things, he began to become more and more independent and do things on his own without as much prompting. And so that was really cool to see. But it did take, it wasn't immediate. It was several weeks of us into the intervention before we started to see that transformation. So the big piece is incorporating evidence-based strategies to teach daily living skills. So I'm going to talk through some of these. This is a long list of things. This is meant to be something to think on. You know your child the best, so what works for them? What's worked in the past when you were, teaching them to go potty, or working on getting them to brush their teeth, or getting them to help feed or walk the dog. So kind of stepping back and think through, what are the evidence-based strategies that have worked in the past for them? Okay. This is a resource. It was published in 2020. It's evidence-based practices. I know this is super difficult to see, but this is in that publication, and it's just a helpful reference. It tells us what strategies, which are these abbreviations over here, work for specific skills like adaptive and self-help skills, which is what we're chatting about today. So just about all of the things we're talking about today are on this list and are evidence-based strategies. In this report, it'll talk through, for example, video modeling, which you'll see here for adaptive and self-help is an evidence-based strategy for, really just about everyone except toddlers. And so that's something we utilize in STRAW as a result. Okay, so I'm going to talk through some evidence-based strategies. So a lot of our strategies are behavioral in nature because they work really well, learning a skill and being rewarded for it. Probably the technique we use the most in various forms is a task analysis. It can be helpful for pretty much any daily living skills, and it just helps break things down into manageable steps and provides a sort of blueprint for how to do various skills. So what steps do you need to do for your morning routine? What do you need to do laundry or clean the bathroom? And what's nice about this, you can use words or images, but these can eventually be faded back as the team really masters the skill, and it's always available to them if they need to refer to it. And so in our STRAW group, what we do is we use this to break down the steps of a task, and then also to get an understanding for the parent and the team, how independent are you? And then what could you do to be more independent? How could you prompt yourself and not be reliant on a caregiver to help you with this specific task? Okay, here's an example of how after we did this, a lot of teens use their phones, like using calendar and reminder apps. And so we use Google Calendar a lot and Google Tasks. And you can put a whole checklist in here and integrate it into their Google Calendar. So it pops up every morning when they wake up and they see the list of things. Other strategies we use are putting, a Post-it note on the bathroom mirror, or hanging up a whiteboard, in the hallway, on their bedroom door of the task analysis, so that is their reference point to check it off. And some families will say, I used to prompt them through everything, and now I just say, check your rhythm checklist. Or did you do your morning rhythm? We have 5 minutes till we have to get into the car. And that's the prompt, as opposed to, did you brush your teeth? Did you pack your lunch? Did you put everything in your backpack? So it's meant to be a way to increase independence over time. And hopefully there's no reminders after the teen gets really good at it. Another behavioral strategy that works really well is chaining. And so there's forward chaining and backward chaining. The essence of this, and this is something you can read more about. So in forward chaining, you are going to teach a behavioral chain of steps. So like washing your hands, and you have the child do the first step independently, and then you may prompt and or model and do hand over hand of these other steps. So the goal is they master the first step, and eventually after they do that, you'll go to the second and so on until they have all of the steps mastered. In backward chaining, you would start with the last step and go through the same process, just in backwards order. Here's an example of how you could do that with cleaning the bathroom. So you, that first time you do everything you do it and you have them watch as you kind of walk them through it. That second time you say, okay, you're going to clean the sink, wipe down the sink and counter and faucet. Here's your supplies. I'm going to watch you. And then we're going to do the rest together. And then maybe that next week they do the sink and the mirror, and till they get to the point where they can do all of those steps on their own. I always think of a recipe as a sort of task analysis, right? It breaks it down for you. You've got your ingredients, but then you've got your steps. So you could use chaining for things like how to make scrambled eggs, how to make a grilled cheese, where they watch you do it, and then you're there. You're giving them feedback as they do that first step, and then you help them with the subsequent steps until they've mastered all of them and are comfortable doing that. A key component of the contract we talked about earlier is motivation. It is extremely important to determine what's going to motivate your team to learn and perform a new skill. Eventually, these skills will become basic expectations as they take on new skills, but they're more likely to engage in a new behavior if they receive a reward. So important components of a reward, it's got to be motivating and something they potentially don't have a lot of access to. So, video games are tricky, but video game time is not motivating if they can play whenever they want. If they wake up with 20 minutes and they want to have more like an hour, then they might be motivated to earn that other 40 minutes by learning new skills or doing things around the house. Other important components of a reward, it should be really specific. This is what you get when you do this. It should be commensurate with the skill. So you shouldn't earn a new video game just for doing your morning rhythm one day a week. That might be something that you have to do your morning rhythm, again, depending on the family, 4 out of 5 days for 6 weeks, and we can go get that new video game. So you want it to be commensurate with the word. Smaller things, might be getting to stay up for 20 minutes on Friday later than usual. You must be able to deliver the reward ideally right after they earn it. If not, it would be giving an IOU and talking about when that IOU can be traded in. Consistency is really important. They should always get that reward if they earned it. If it was on the contract, they've got to earn it. The same way we'd be upset if we didn't get our paycheck after we worked. They did the work, they should get that reward. Some other strategies I want to talk through, modeling and technology and the hidden curriculum. So I'm going to go through a few examples. Adult or peer modeling is a really great skill to utilize. I have a bunch of pictures of the grocery store up here just because, it's a great time to model a lot of fantastic money management skills. When you're picking out items, why do you buy the generic tomato sauce versus the expensive one that you all like versus the one that's on sale? And let's look at the prices and ounces, how many ounces are we getting for the price? This is an opportunity to build understanding of, quality and price, and can be some really helpful conversations as they get older and start doing more of that on their own. Things like picking out produce. How do you pick out a good apple? How do you make sure you're picking out good strawberries? Navigating the grocery store in itself. If you need to buy rice, where is that? Are you going to just look for the items you think it would be with? Are you looking at the signs in the grocery store? And then paying. There's some social skills that go along with that too. Greeting the cashier and talking with them, troubleshooting if you're doing self-checkout, but paying, whether it's with cash, credit, or debit. And then as well, when you get home, it's unloading and those groceries and putting them away where they go. So a lot of great modeling can happen in real time, shopping, whether it be at the grocery store or at Walmart or Target or wherever you shop. Video modeling. So, you could absolutely make a video of yourself or a sibling or, a friend doing a skill like laundry or cooking, but YouTube is just full of great videos of people doing these things already. So I always say this is an opportunity to go out and look. using self-checkout, doing the laundry, cooking, has great videos. And so I think that will be something that then also correspond with a specific recipe if you're using like a food blogger or a website like All Recipes. So it's a really great resource. And you can also set your team loose and say, hey, find a recipe to cook. And then let's get the ingredients and we'll watch the video and then we'll do it together. A lot of great skills can happen just by doing something like that. PowerPoint, this may sound strange, had a lot of teens who really like making PowerPoints. And so this can be something like doing laundry. How do you sort? Why do you separate clothing? Where do you put things away after you put them away? And so while doing this presentation, they are learning, and then it's a reference later. So just an idea if they like PowerPoint. WikiHow is a website that some may be familiar with. It is basically like Wikipedia for how to do things, and it can be really useful for things like how to use self-checkout at a store, or how to unclog a toilet. There's a lot of different life skills you can look up on WikiHow and find out, and there's visuals as well as breaking it down step by step. Another great resource, and there are lots and lots of them right now, are various phone apps. So if the teen has a phone that they have internet access to and can use apps, this can be really helpful if they are motivated to use the phone and electronics. And I think the other piece we've learned is that if they've got, 20, 30 notifications coming into their phone on a daily basis, it may be going back and disabling some of those so that the important ones for things like alarms or calendar appointments or to-do list items, when they pop up, the teen is more likely to pay attention to them and to do them. So that can be really helpful. But the reality is basic calendar and to-do list apps often just allow you to schedule things when they need to be done. Or I know I talk about these sort of routine checklists, but you can actually have those pop up at 7 o'clock. It's time to start your nighttime rhythm. And there's a checklist that the teen can check off, that they, put the lotion on their face, that they took a shower, that they put their dirty clothes in the hamper, can go through all of those things and they check, and then it's done. And the reality is, as adults, that's a great strategy to use because a lot of us are very dependent on our calendar and to-do list app. Paper and pencil version is fine too, but if a teen really likes their phone or electronic devices, this can be highly motivating for them. I have Google Calendar up here, but I know all phone calendars have aspects of sort of color coding. So maybe purple is school stuff and red is, band, and yellow is family events. And what's nice is, caregivers can get access to the teen's calendar to see what's happening, but to also add things in, oh, I scheduled a dentist appointment for you after school today. I put that in your calendar. And again, this gets them used to kind of using this to checking in and hopefully adding their own things in. They've got a test coming up or, a driving lesson scheduled on this day after school. Other technology, this is one, smart speakers. So, Amazon Alexa is one. We have started using this a lot because it's so user-friendly. So not only can the teen set up verbal reminders, verbal alarms, they can also use their phone to set up those alarms on a recurring basis. So this tends to be a great way to wake up in the morning, and it can serve as a reminder if they did their morning rhythm, can serve as an alarm to switch the laundry from the washer to the dryer. And it has some really nice features like you can snooze it and say, actually, can you remind me that in 15 minutes? And it'll pop up again in 15 minutes and remind you. So, has a lot of really nice features depending on what you're looking for. And if the teen is in the house or in their room, wherever it is, this can be really useful, but it will also pop up on their phone, the reminders as well. The Hidden Curriculum is a resource by Brenda Smith-Miles. And this, what it does is it takes sort of aspects of a situation and breaks them down I believe the way she says it is it kind of makes the gray a little more black and white. And so we often use this for hygiene in particular, because there are some rules around hygiene, and kind of talk through those with teens depending on what they need or what they might struggle with. And then another big piece I just want to emphasize is just there are a lot of naturalistic opportunities to work on life skills. And, you know, again, you want to be realistic about how many you do, how many you tackle, but things like, you know, cooking dinner together, having the teen chop up some onion is a great way to learn life skills, but also get involved in cooking, and they may be then more motivated to eat that meal. Planning an event, if they're an older teen and their, you know, sibling or themselves are having a high school graduation party, you know, how much food do they need to get? What's the budget? You know, what do they need to get at the grocery store? Any party supplies? Those kinds of things are really beneficial. Things like helping to pay the bills. You know, what does the electric bill cost every month? What is the cost of the phone bill? Or if you have subscriptions to like Netflix or Hulu. Cleaning the house for a party, that's more fun, or if they're having a friend over or something like that, but helping them, you know, having them get involved for that. And then medical appointments, having them check in, having them fill out forms and being there to answer their questions, having them, you know, go through the process of refilling their medications and what that looks like. So just sometimes stepping back and thinking through, you know, what can they do is really helpful. I want to just go back to this contract to kind of let you know some of the strategies that we used with this particular teen. So not shockingly, we used task analysis for laundry and for rhythms in particular, that we broke that down for him. And so he had a checklist with his morning and nighttime rhythm steps posted in his room. And then his parents also organized his like personal hygiene items in a small basket, kind of like what you get when you're, you know, if you go dorm shopping at Walmart, there's like a little caddy, and they put all those things in there because it was more likely that he would do all the steps if they did that. But then he was also, you know, able to kind of see when he was out of a product and could alert them and put that on the grocery list and that kind of thing. The family put the entire contract on a whiteboard, and this was like the game changer for this team. Even though this team was motivated by electronics, whiteboard was the game changer. They had the whiteboard in the kitchen, had their daily and weekly expectations. And what the parent did is they checked in on things at meal times. So at breakfast, which was one of the last steps in the morning rhythm, they checked what he had done. And then at dinner, they checked what he had done kind of in between and then planned for the evening. And so that was a really successful strategy. They did use alarms on the iPad actually for some tasks that were hard to remember, starting laundry in particular, getting it out of the dryer, putting it away. His teen was very motivated by cooking. And as a result, that kind of grocery shopping became something that he enjoyed doing because he liked to cook somewhat very specific, elaborate meals, and then would want to go to the grocery store to find those items. And so that was kind of a win-win and helped with some of his money management skills. This was a team that didn't have a ton of rewards that were meaningful at the time that we started, but we eventually kind of figured out some things that he would like and that his parents were also able to withhold from him if he did not earn them. And so that took some time to figure it out, but we worked it out. Okay, the last part of this whole process is to reevaluate the contract regularly. So every week, especially when you're starting, and then eventually it might go to every other week, potentially every month, depending on how the team's doing and if they're doing really well or if there's some brainstorming. But this is when you change up rewards. A lot of times, especially in the beginning, teens might be really motivated for 2 or 3 weeks for a reward, and then they're not. And so this allows you to kind of make that contact and change things up, but also add new skills, modify expectations, and do some of that fading of rewards as well. Briefly, just some obstacles and barriers that come up. So kind of to be aware of as you're starting this process is that, you know, sometimes parents are over involved and have a hard time letting go of helping or wanting something to be done just right. You know, I like to do the laundry because I do it a specific way. Well, maybe just have the teen wash their clothes and teach them how you want them to do it. Just letting go. They're getting older, letting them kind of grow up. That's hard for any parent. Time, really having the time to dedicate to work on these skills. That's why being realistic is important. As well as sort of related to that, prioritizing other skills. Adolescence is filled with academics and, extracurricular activities, as well as whatever's going on with the family, but it's picking some things and kind of prioritizing those life skills. There's also some obstacles teens might face, and this may be where it can be helpful to bring in a therapist or other professional, things like sensory issues and aversions, especially around hygiene, especially around things like smells, cleaning supplies, cooking, that kind of thing. Time, they have a lot of homework. This may be time hard to prioritize. Interest and motivation, but also fear. We've had a lot of teens who've been fearful of cooking because they've been burned before in the past accidentally, but also a fear of failing and a fear of growing up, that this really signals that they're getting older. And so overall, the take-home message is that these skills are really important and they're critical to becoming a successful adult for all of us. And that if you make a realistic, doable plan to target these life skills, it may really lead to a great outcome down the road in terms of college or working or social connectedness or quality of life. These are just some folks I want to acknowledge who've really helped along the way in terms of mentoring or being involved in the development of our straw intervention, as well as the grant agencies that have supported this work. And if you have any questions, here is my email. You are welcome to contact me with any questions or comments, and I would love to connect. So please feel free to do that. And I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.